Alright, so I've just discovered this very strange glowing object, and I have studied it with all of the scientific knowledge that I have and have tested it, and I can't make heads or tails of why it glows, what it's made out of, or how it works. And I can't explain it with natural ideas because it defies everything. So this must be supernatural. Of course, there's a question to be answered. What is the supernatural? Well, it depends on who you ask. But the definition given by Google and other places is anything that can't be tested by science and is beyond the natural. How would we know that it is that thing? This is a huge problem, at least if you believe in the supernatural. The reason is that you would never actually know that you were looking at a supernatural object, event, etc. For the very fact that you cannot test it. Now, you might say, well, but we did all the different scientific experiments that we knew about, that we could do, and all those experiments, everything failed. Well, that doesn't mean that it will always be that way. It might be that tomorrow we come up with a scientific way to test it. We just don't have it today. So, how could you hope to know that we will never know what it is using science? And before you can say, well, it's not a natural thing, how do you know that? Because you couldn't test it? See, it defies the ability to classify it by its own definition. Even if you found it, you couldn't say that you found it without committing either the fallacy of appeal to ignorance or appeal to personal incredulity, or both. Like, we couldn't figure out what it is. It must be the supernatural. See, we know that in the past, people didn't know that lightning was just natural, and they thought that it was supernatural. And they claimed with very much certainty that it must be from the gods. A similar story can be told of St. Elmo's fire. Again, it's sort of like lightning, but it's a little bit different. But still, this is something that confused the bleep out of people at the time, and they thought that this was from the spiritual realm, the gods. It was an ill omen, or maybe a sign of good luck, but nobody knew that it was just natural. Also, you have the Northern Lights, or Aurora Borealis. What the bleep is going on there? Ancient people might have thought that this was something supernatural. Solar eclipses were also thought to be a sign from the gods, as well as lunar eclipses being some sort of sign or omen. Of course, there are still people today that think the red moon means some sort of sign. It doesn't, but people think that it does. So if this is a supernatural thing, then we would never know that, because we could never make the statement that we have discovered the supernatural, unless we're fine with committing the logical fallacy of appeal to ignorance and or the logical fallacy of appeal to personal incredulity. One being the statement, well, I don't know what it is because all the science failed, so it must be supernatural. Appeal to ignorance, I don't know, equals X, X being supernatural. Or the statement, well, I can't believe that it would be anything but the supernatural. I can't come up with anything else. That would be appeal to personal incredulity. Just because you can't think of it doesn't mean that there isn't an alternate explanation. And certainly it's pretty, and sure, it's weird looking, but so what? We know that the natural exists. We can test the natural. We can learn more about it. We don't have an example of the supernatural at all. Here's another way to think about it. If you encountered an infinite path, you would never be able to identify that path as infinite because you are finite. You wouldn't be able to see that it keeps going on forever. You could walk down it and keep walking down it until you were just exhausted and look down it, maybe grab some binoculars or a telescope or something and be like, well, I don't know. It just keeps going. I don't know how long it goes. And that would be the right answer is I don't know. Because if you proclaimed this path is infinite, well, you're making an unwarranted assumption. You don't know that it's infinite. Even if it truly is infinite in reality, you'd have no way to identify it. So let's say that you say, fine, I don't care. It's infinite. Ha, it's infinite. I'm done. The next person comes along and says, oh, right over that hill, it stopped. Just beyond the point where you gave up. I walked a little bit further and over the hill. That's where the path ended. It wasn't infinite after all. Now, neither of these analogies show that infinity or a supernatural couldn't exist. They merely show that even if they did exist, we would never be able to say that they exist because we couldn't make that claim. Not without some logical fallacy. And for me, I prefer not to perform logical fallacies. Well, maybe there's a different way to define the supernatural that avoids this logical problem. Perhaps. But do you have an example of that? Or do you just want to change the definition? What is the definition going to be based upon? Do you have empirical evidence of that? Any repeatable tests that you could run on it? Do you have a valid and sound argument for it? If not, I submit we must be skeptical that it's a thing at all.